4 or 5 years, I took care of my wife, a woman trapped in the mind of a child. Then, overnight, she transformed back into the ruthless CEO she was always meant to be. The first thing she did after she woke up was ask for a divorce, to make way for her one true love. What she didn't know was that I'd been praying she would. Just sign it, Ethan. The voice, cold as the marble floor of the Park Avenue penthouse, cut through the silence. It was laced with an impatience that bordered on contempt. I lifted my head and looked at the woman on the couch across from me. Chloe Astor, my wife. She wore a black Tom Ford pantsuit tailored to perfection. Her makeup was flawless, her eyes as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. The face that once held a look of innocent wonder was now a mask of glacial indifference. With a flick of her long fingers, she pushed a divorce settlement and a black debit card across the glass coffee table. "There's $50 million on that card," she said, her tone flat, as if dismissing a bellhop. "Consider it compensation for your trouble these last 5 years. You took care of me, I'll give you that. This is more than enough to ensure you never have to work again." A man sat beside her, his arm draped possessively over her shoulders. Julian Croft. He wore the smug look of a victor, a faint smirk playing on his lips. The way he looked at me was the way you'd look at a stray dog that had been clinging to a life of warmth and comfort, now about to be kicked back out into the rain. 5 years ago, a bizarre car crash had left Chloe Astor, the sole heir to the Astor Corporation, with severe brain trauma, reducing her mental age to that of a 7-year-old. To stabilize the company and fend off the vultures circling within and without, her grandfather, the old man himself, had handpicked a husband for her. That husband was me, Ethan Vance, a guy from a middle-class background, fresh out of college, who every friend and relative I had said was the luckiest bastard on earth for marrying up so spectacularly. For 5 years, I played the part of the devoted husband, the saint. I spoon-fed her every meal because she'd make a mess like a toddler. I taught her how to get dressed day after day because she couldn't tell the difference between a button and a zipper. I read her bedtime stories every night to help her sleep because she was terrified of the dark and would wake up crying. She would curl up in my arms, call me E, and look at me with those impossibly clear, innocent eyes, telling me she loved me more than anyone. When I get home from my pointless day job, she'd launch herself at me like an excited puppy, wrapping her arms around my legs and proudly offering me a piece of candy she'd hidden away just for me. Everyone said that even though Chloe had lost her mind, she'd found a good man. Even old man Astor had once clapped me on the shoulder, his eyes wet with tears, and said, "Ethan, this family will not forget what you've done." And now she was back. A week ago, she'd collapsed at home. When she woke up in the hospital, her eyes were clear again. The doctors called it a medical miracle. She'd recovered everything, her memories, her formidable intellect. Everything except the last 5 years. That time, she said, was a blurry, surreal dream. And the first thing she did was have her lawyers draw up these papers. She was nestled against Julian Croft, the man she was practically engaged to before the accident. "Ethan, thank you for taking care of me," she'd said. "But our marriage was an accident, a business arrangement. The arrangement is over. It's time for me to get back to the life I was supposed to have. Julian is the man I want to spend that life with." The house staff whispered in the corners, their eyes a mixture of pity and contempt. Pity for my 5 years of service, all for nothing. Contempt for the kept man finally getting his walking papers. Julian finally spoke, squeezing Chloe's hand. "Chloe, darling, don't waste your breath. He's just a hired hand who was in it for the money. Give him his severance and let's be done with it." He turned to me, his chin tilted in arrogance. "Ethan Vance, right? I've heard about you. 50 million is a lot of money. More than someone like you could earn in 10 lifetimes. Take the money, get out of the Astor family, and don't ever let Chloe see you again. Oh, and by the way, Chloe will soon be my wife. Astor Corp and Croft Enterprises are merging. I trust you'll know your place." His words were knives. I watched Chloe's face. Not a flicker of protest. She implicitly agreed with him. In her eyes, my 5 years of devotion could be summed up in 2 words: the money. 5 years of patience, of companionship, of silent anguish. Just a service that could be bought out for $50 million. Fine. Honestly, it was more than fine. I ignored Julian and fixed my gaze on Chloe. "Is that all?" I asked slowly. Chloe's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly, as if she thought I was getting greedy. What? You think it's not enough? Julian sneered. What? You think 5 years of babysitting is worth more? 50 million for 5 years of your youth is the deal of a lifetime, pal. I kept my eyes on Chloe. I mean, besides the money, is there anything else you wanted to say to me? A flicker of something, annoyance, maybe disgust, crossed her face. Ethan, I'm not negotiating with you. My time is valuable. I don't have the patience for these kinds of games. She stood up, looking down at me. Either you sign and take the money, or my lawyers will handle it. And I guarantee you'll walk away with nothing. Our marriage, after all, was nothing but a contract from the very beginning. I finally smiled. For the first time in 5 years, in front of her, I let a genuine smile spread across my face. To them, it must have looked like the pathetic, grateful grin of a little man who'd just won the lottery. All right, I picked up the pen. Without a moment's hesitation, I signed my name at the bottom of the agreement, Ethan Vance. The signature was a sharp, confident scrawl, completely at odds with the mild-mannered man they thought I was. Chloe's eyes widened for a second, surprised by how easily I'd capitulated. I pushed the signed document back to her. Then, right in front of them, I picked up the black debit card. I didn't look at the card. I looked at Julian. I gave him a wide, toothy grin. Mr. Croft, you were wrong about one thing. He blinked. What's that? This 50 million, I said, waving the card before slipping into my pocket with the casual air of a man pocketing a Metro card. Isn't my severance package. I stood up, smoothing out the front of a worn button-down I'd owned for 3 years. I met their confused stares and said, word by word, it's your first down payment. With that, I didn't spare another glance at Chloe's stunned face or Julian's dumbfounded expression. I turned and walked, my stride long and purposeful, out of the gilded cage I called home for 5 years. The moment I stepped out of the building onto Park Avenue, the afternoon sun was so bright it made my eyes water. 5 years. I had waited for this day for 1,826 days. Chloe asked her, Julian Croft, you think the story is over? No. The real game is just beginning. I didn't leave the Upper East Side right away. I found a seat at a minimalist coffee shop across the street from the Astor Building and ordered a double espresso, black. My mind had never been clearer. My phone buzzed. A text from encrypted number. Got all. I typed back. Yes. The reply was instant. 5 years. Was it worth it? I looked out the window at the imposing, doorman-guarded building, my fingers slowly typing a single line on the screen. My father's life is priceless. Send. Then I deleted the entire message history, wiped my call log, popped out the SIM card, snapped it in half, and dropped it into a public trash can on my way out. I used the card in my pocket to buy a new burner phone and a new SIM. The first call I made was to my lawyer, David Chun. David, I said, my voice calm. It's time. There was a pause on the other end, then a heavy sigh. Ethan, are you sure about this? Once you start, there's no going back. The Astors and the Crofts together. That's a war on 2 fronts. I'm counting on them joining forces, I said, looking at my distorted reflection in the dark surface of my coffee. I set this board for 5 years. The higher they climb, the harder they'll fall. All right, I understand. The capital has been moved to the offshore accounts in stages, just like you instructed. And the opposition research I've been compiling on Croft Enterprises, all the dirt on their key players. It's ready to go. Good. I hung up and downed the last of my espresso. The bitter liquid was a jolt to my system, making my mind hum with energy. You must be wondering why I would agree to marry Chloe Astor. Was it just for the money? To climb the social ladder? 5 years ago, I had nothing. I had graduated top of my class from MIT, full of ambition, only to come home to a family tragedy. My father, Robert Vance, a brilliant, hardworking engineer, was framed and sent to prison the year I graduated. The charge was corporate espionage. And the company he supposedly stole from? Their biggest competitor was Croft Enterprises, run by Julian Croft's father. My father was the most honorable man I knew. He would never do something like that. I frantically tried to find evidence to clear his name, begging for help from anyone who would listen, but every door was slammed in my face. The evidence against him was airtight, as if an invisible net had been cast over our family, suffocating us. He was convicted. Not long after, he died in prison from a sudden heart attack. His last letter to me contained a single, chilling sentence. Be careful of the Crofts. They did this to me. I knelt on the cold floor of my apartment, clutching that letter, and cried until I had nothing left. From that moment on, revenge was the only thing that kept me alive. I started digging into the Croft family. But they were a dynasty in this city, with connections in every corner of politics and the underworld. I was just a kid, completely out of my depth. My investigation quickly got their attention. I was fired from my job. I couldn't find work anywhere. I was even jumped and beaten by a couple of thugs who warned me to back off. My life had hit rock bottom. Just when I was about to lose all hope, old man Astor found me. His offer was simple. Marry into his family, become the husband of his granddaughter, Chloe, who had lost her mind. In return, he would give me a generous stipend, and after my service was complete, he promised I would be set for life. He said he'd done a background check on me, that he knew my story. He said he admired my resilience and my intelligence. At the time, it sounded insane. I didn't know Chloe. Why would he choose me? It wasn't until he showed me a file that I understood. The file contained the complete investigation into the car crash that had destroyed Chloe's mind 5 years earlier. And the report made one thing clear. It was no accident. The trail of evidence behind the hit-and-run driver pointed faintly, but unmistakably, to one man, Julian Croft. It turned out Julian had been coveting Astor Corp for years. His courtship of Chloe was just a means to an end, a way to orchestrate a merger by marriage. The car crash was his attempt to get rid of her, to throw the company into chaos so he could swoop in and pick up the pieces. He never expected her to survive, albeit in a diminished state. But what Julian really never expected was that my father, Robert Vance, through his own work on a government contract, had just stumbled upon irrefutable proof that Croft Enterprises was cooking its books to secure billions in federal subsidies. My father was about to blow the whistle anonymously. The true purpose of the car crash was to eliminate two threats at once. Julian wanted to silence my father and get rid of Chloe in one fell swoop. But in the chaos of the crash scene, he must have assumed my father was just a random casualty. And Chloe's survival became the biggest loose end of his plan. Old man Astor was sharp. He had suspected Julian all along, but had no concrete proof. He knew about my father's case and had deduced the blood feud between me and the Crofts. He chose me not just to be a caretaker for Chloe. He was choosing a weapon, a knife that could be slipped between an enemy's ribs without anyone noticing. He knew that I, and only I, had the most powerful motivation to protect Chloe and to go after Julian. We had a common enemy. Ethan, mister, Astor had said to me that day, his eyes deep and shrewd, I need you to come into my family, to be Chloe's husband in name and in public. For the next 5 years, your job isn't just to take care of her. It's to watch Julian for me, to gather evidence of his crimes. Your father's debt, Chloe's debt. We will collect it together. Why don't you just go to the police? I had asked him. The old man gave a bitter smile. With what evidence? Julian covered his tracks perfectly. And what's more, my own house is not in order. My good-for-nothing sons and nephews are just waiting for me to die, so they can carve up the company. If I declare open war on the Crofts, Astor Corp will implode from the inside. This is the only way, a strategic retreat. He needed time. He needed a pawn, moving in the shadows. And I was the perfect pawn, so I agreed. I buried my ambition, my anger, my entire personality. I became mild, pliable, a man who seemed grateful just to have a roof over his head. I moved into the Astor residence and began my daily routine of caring for a woman with the mind of a 7-year-old. At first, it was just a transaction, a long, quiet wait before the storm of my revenge. I was detached, observing her innocence, her tantrums. She once poured an entire bottle of Chanel No. 5 into the koi pond, killing a dozen priceless fish. She folded my MIT diploma into a paper airplane and sailed it off the penthouse terrace. She once crashed my laptop in the middle of the night while I was analyzing Croft's financial records, then giggled and said she wanted to play hide and seek. I would crush the frustration and rage deep inside me, telling myself over and over that this was all part of the act. But the human heart isn't made of stone. 5 years, over 1,800 days and nights, side by side. When I was delirious with a fever, she sat by my bed, pressing her small, cool hands to my forehead, clumsily trying to wipe me down with a washcloth, whispering, You don't die? Well, I do if you die. On the anniversary of my father's death, when I drank myself into a stupor and hid in a dark corner of the apartment, crying silently, she was the one who found me. She mimicked the way I comforted her, gently patting my back and pushing her favorite strawberry lollipop into my mouth. Don't cry, she said in her small voice. Have some candy. Candy makes it better. When I came home one night, bruised and bleeding after one of Julian's goons had decided to send me a message, she was the first to see my injuries. She burst into tears, then carefully took out cotton swabs and antiseptic, dabbing at my cuts while her own tears fell onto my arm. In that moment, the ice around my heart cracked. I could no longer tell where the act ended and where my real feelings began. I even started to feel a sense of dread. What if she stayed like this forever? What would I do? Would I stay by her side, or would I eventually have to leave her in safe hands to finish what I'd started? It was a question I couldn't answer. And then, suddenly, she woke up, and with the coldest possible words, she pushed me away. It was for the best. It severed the last thread of hesitation I had. I, Ethan Vance, did not claw my way out of hell to fall in love. I put the burner phone in my pocket, stood up, and walked out into the sun. My first move wasn't against Croft Enterprises. Julian was too cunning, his core business too entrenched. A direct attack would be difficult. My target was Astor Corporation, the very company that was about to merge with the prize he was about to claim. I was going to pull the rug out from under him at the peak of his triumph. I was going to make sure the prize he'd coveted for so long not only slipped through his fingers, but turned around and bit his hand off. My greatest advantage came from the last 5 years. As Chloe's husband, I lived in the heart of the Astor Empire. The old man, for all his shrewdness, couldn't watch me 24/7. And Chloe, my sweet, simple Chloe, was the perfect cover. She would grab my hand and pull me into her grandfather's study because she wanted me to read to her. She would cling to my arm and wander through every department of Astor Corp just to show off a new hair clip I'd bought her. She would even bring me along to the exclusive family dinners, where the most sensitive business was discussed. To everyone, I was a harmless accessory attached to the family's resident child. No one puts their guard up around a fool's husband. Over 5 years, I used this access to piece together a complete picture of Astor Corp, its shareholder structure, its internal factions, its financial weak spots, and all of its dirty little secrets. That information was now sitting on an encrypted hard drive. It was my wedding gift to Chloe and Julian. 3 days later, Astor Corp issued a press release announcing a deep strategic merger with Croft Enterprises. A massive engagement party was scheduled for the following month to formally celebrate the union of the two dynasties. The news sent both companies' stock prices soaring. The titans of Wall Street offered their congratulations, and the media hailed it as the merger of the century. I sat in my new, sparsely furnished apartment, watching Chloe and Julian standing side by side on a business news program. I allowed myself a cold smile. On the screen, Chloe was radiant, confident, the very picture of a corporate titan. Julian was smug, basking in the glow of his victory. The golden couple, a match made in heaven. If you didn't know the truth, you might even applaud them. I turned off the television and called David. "It's time," I said. "Are you sure you don't want to wait for the engagement party? The impact would be much greater," David advised. "No," I shook my head. "That would be too quick. I don't want a sudden collapse. I want them to feel the slow, agonizing rot. I want them to watch as everything they value most crumbles to dust before their very eyes." I wanted Chloe to see how her brilliant decisions were leading her precious empire into an abyss. I wanted her to know what kind of man her one true love really was. That afternoon, an anonymous article titled "The Astor Scandal: Is the New Energy Project the Next Theranos?" appeared on a popular financial blog. Written from the perspective of a supposed Astor Corp insider, the article detailed numerous red flags in the company's flagship new battery project. It alleged that the project's core technology had a fatal, hidden flaw. All the impressive performance data, it claimed, had been faked under specific lab conditions and could never be replicated in mass production. The post included several blurry but damning charts comparing lab results to simulated real-world performance, along with a simplified analysis of the project's cash flow. The analysis showed that the majority of the project's funding hadn't gone to R&D, but had been funneled through a series of shell corporations into several private, offshore accounts. The article was expertly written, full of technical jargon and compelling logic. It was clearly the work of an industry professional. It was like dropping a bomb on the market. When the market opened that afternoon, Astor Corp's stock went into a nosedive. Within an hour, it had dropped nearly 8%. Astor's PR team went into overdrive, issuing a statement that the article was malicious slander and threatening legal action. Chloe herself called an emergency press conference. She was poised and calm, methodically refuting every point in the article. She presented patent certificates and glowing reports from third-party verification firms. Her powerful, confident performance managed to temporarily stop the bleeding. The stock's decline slowed. I watched her on the screen, cool and collected, and felt nothing. This was just the appetizer. Chloe, my dear Chloe, you think that's the whole truth? The patents you showed, the reports. They're all real. What you don't know is that the technology itself was a trap from the very beginning. This new energy project was my idea. Delivered, of course, to your grandfather by my sweet, unsuspecting Chloe. 2 years ago, I stumbled upon a small European tech startup with a revolutionary battery technology. I put together a simple, easy-to-understand brief on it and explained it to Chloe. Look, Chloe, I'd said, like I was explaining a cartoon. This little thing can make cars go super fast and super far without any gas. She didn't really understand, but she thought it was fun. The next day, she took the file to the grandfather she idolized. The old man, ever the sharp businessman, immediately saw the project's immense potential. After a brief period of due diligence, Astor Corp acquired the startup for a fortune, making it the cornerstone of the company's 10-year plan. Mr. Astor thought he'd struck gold. What he didn't know was that the startup, from its founder to its core technology, was a fiction I had created through David's overseas network. I had sold him a gold bar that was real, but rigged to explode. The technology's hidden flaw was that its chemical stability would collapse when exposed to a specific catalyst. And the formula for that catalyst was known by only one person in the world, me. As for the official reports Chloe presented, they were all authentic. It just so happened that the verification firms that produced them had all received generous donations over the past 2 years from anonymous benefactors I had arranged. Naturally, their tests found nothing wrong, and the anonymous blog post was just the first smokescreen. Its purpose wasn't to destroy Astor Corp. It was to get everyone's attention, especially Julian's. I knew Julian all too well. He was greedy, arrogant, and always looking for a shortcut. To him, Astor Corp's stock plummeting wasn't a crisis. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He would absolutely use this chance to short the company while simultaneously buying up its devalued shares on the open market, trying to gain a controlling interest for pennies on the dollar. And that was my real goal. I wanted him to push all his chips onto the Astor Corp poker table. And then I would set the table on fire. Events unfolded exactly as I predicted. Despite Chloe's strong PR offensive, a sense of panic had already set in among investors. Over the next few days, a steady stream of new, negative stories about Astor Corp appeared online. A scandal involving a senior executive here, a story about regulatory violations on a past project there. None of them were fatal blows, but the constant barrage was like a death by 1,000 cuts, slowly eroding market confidence. Astor's stock price continued its volatile, downward slide. Chloe was running ragged. She was a one-woman fire department, racing from meetings to interviews to damage control sessions. She was brilliant. I never doubted that. In just a few days, she had demonstrated a business acumen and strength of far beyond her years. Unfortunately for her, she was fighting an enemy who knew her and her company inside and out. I saw her on TV, exhausted, with dark circles forming under her eyes. And Julian, just as I'd planned, began his feast. David confirmed that Julian, using a network of offshore accounts and in league with several hedge fund allies, was buying up Astor stock at a furious pace. Within a week, they had amassed a staggering number of shares. Julian's ambition was clear. He didn't want a partnership. He wanted a hostile takeover. And Chloe, lost in her romantic fantasy, seemed completely oblivious. Or perhaps she simply refused to believe it. She continued to appear with him at public events, projecting an image of an unbreakable alliance. I could just imagine the lies he was feeding her in private. Chloe, don't worry, I've got your back. This is clearly the work of your backstabbing uncles trying to force you out. I'm moving every dollar I have to support your stock price and protect you. What a touching lie. Chloe was probably eating it up, overcome with gratitude. She had mistaken a wolf for a lover and had thrown away the only shield she ever had. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of my apartment, a glass of bourbon in my hand, looking out at the city lights. It was time to close the net. The next day, Astor Corp held an emergency shareholder meeting. The agenda was to address the recent stock volatility and reevaluate the new energy project. I knew this was when Julian would make his move. With his newly acquired shares and the support of several Astor family shareholders he'd already bribed, he was confident he could challenge Chloe's leadership, perhaps even seize control of the company. I drove to the Astor Tower. I didn't go in. I found a table at the coffee shop across the street. By the window, I opened my laptop, and a secure video conference window appeared. It was David. "Everything is in place?" I asked. David nodded, his expression grim. "It is. Ethan, this is an incredibly risky move. If this backfires..." "It won't." I cut him off, my gaze firm. "We've crossed the Rubicon." I took a deep breath. "Do it." At that same moment, in the top-floor boardroom of the Astor Tower, the atmosphere was electric with tension. As expected, Julian launched his attack. He and a handful of other shareholders accused Chloe of gross mismanagement, claiming the new energy project was a massive risk that had already cost the company billions. They motioned for a vote to remove her as chairperson and to immediately freeze all funding for the project. Chloe fought back, but she was outnumbered. Her own uncles, men who had been loyal to her grandfather, now sat in silence. Some had even openly sided with Julian. The vultures were circling, the ugliness of human nature stripped bare in the face of greed. Julian was triumphant. He looked at Chloe's pale face, his eyes shining with avarice. He was already imagining himself at the helm of their combined corporate empire, wielding unimaginable power. Just as he was about to call for the final vote, the boardroom doors burst open. It was Chloe's assistant, her face white as a sheet. She held up a tablet, her hand trembling. "Ms. Astor, Mr. Croft, something's happened. It's a disaster." On the tablet screen was a breaking international news alert. The headline was enough to send a chill down the spine of every person in that room. "Major tech scandal. European Chemicals Agency issues emergency ban on Stardust Gen 1 battery tech, citing critical explosion risk." Stardust Generation 1. That was the internal code name for Astor Corp's new energy project. The news report featured a spokesperson from the agency, who, in the gravest of terms, announced their latest findings. They had discovered that when the battery technology came into contact with a specific, widely used, and inexpensive industrial additive, it triggered a violent, irreversible chain reaction, causing the battery to explode within seconds. The report was accompanied by a horrifying video from their lab. In the video, a Stardust battery, while charging, was touched by a single drop of a clear liquid. It instantly began to swell, then erupted in a violent explosion with the force of a small grenade. The boardroom fell into a dead silence. Every eye was glued to the screen. Every face was a mask of shock, horror, and utter disbelief. The smug smile vanished from Julian's face. In the space of a few seconds, his complexion went from flushed with victory to chalk white, then to a ghastly, ashen gray. He knew, better than anyone, what this meant. It was over. Everything was over. Astor Corp stock would not just fall, it would be wiped out. And he, the brilliant strategist who had bet his entire fortune, leveraged to the hilt, on Astor's recovery, would be ruined. In a single moment, he would be not just broke, but buried under a mountain of debt. "No, that's impossible," Julian stammered, his mind reeling. "It's fake. It has to be a conspiracy." He whipped his head around to face Chloe, his eyes shot with blood. This was you. You knew about this all along, didn't you?" Chloe was in shock herself. She stared at the screen, her body swaying. She didn't understand. How could this happen? Her project, her life's work, the future of her entire company. How could it be a bomb waiting to go off? The reports from the verification firms. They had said it was perfectly safe. Why? How is this possible? In the chaos, no one noticed one of the shareholders Julian had bribed quietly pull out his phone and hit send. And across the street, in a coffee shop, my laptop screen displayed a live feed from inside that boardroom. I watched the despair twist Julian's face into a grotesque mask. I watched Chloe, lost and broken. I felt no joy, just a cold, vast emptiness. I closed the video feed, picked up my jacket, and walked out. Dad, do you see this? This is just the interest. I'll make him spend the rest of his life paying back the principal. Astor Corporation was finished. When the market opened the next day, the stock was halted after an immediate, catastrophic drop. Trading was suspended indefinitely. Market confidence had evaporated. Orders were canceled. Partners terminated their contracts, and banks came calling to collect their debts. The vultures descended. The company's fall from grace was as spectacular as its rise. And Julian Croft was in even worse shape. He had not only lost all of his company's liquid assets, but his high-leverage bets had left him with a debt so large it was almost astronomical. His so-called allies scattered, disavowing any connection to him. Croft Enterprises, once a titan of industry, was now on the verge of collapse. In just a few days, Julian had fallen from the heavens into the deepest circle of hell. And I, in the midst of this financial carnage, had made a fortune. Before dropping the bomb, David, following my instructions, had used our offshore accounts to partner with several major hedge funds to massively short both Astor and Croft stock. We had made enough money to buy what was left of Astor Corp 10 times over. Of course, that was never my goal. It wasn't about the money. I drove up to the Astor estate in Greenwich. The security guards at the gate were new. Inside, the grand mansion was in a state of disarray. A priceless vase was shattered on the floor. Couch cushions were strewn about. The air was thick with the stench of despair. I found Chloe in the living room. She was wearing a simple gray sweatshirt and sweatpants, her hair uncombed, no makeup. She was sitting on the floor, staring blankly into space. She had lost a shocking amount of weight in just a few days. Her eyes were hollow, devoid of their usual fire. She looked, for a moment, just like the lost little girl I had once known. My heart gave an unexpected, painful throb. She heard my footsteps and slowly looked up. When she saw it was me, a flicker of something finally entered her empty eyes. It was a complex storm of emotions: shock, confusion, hatred, and something else. A vulnerability she herself probably didn't recognize. "It was you, wasn't it?" she asked, her voice a dry rasp. I didn't deny it. I walked over and knelt down in front of her, meeting her gaze. "Why?" She stared at me, her eyes suddenly turning red. "I gave you $50 million. Enough for you to live in luxury for the rest of your life. Why would you do this? Why destroy my company? Why destroy me?" "Destroy you?" I gave a sad, weary laugh. "Chloe, you give yourself too much credit. You were never my target." "Then what was it for? Revenge for the divorce? Because I chose Julian?" "Julian?" I shook my head, my voice low and hard. "He doesn't deserve to be a reason." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dying autumn garden. 5 years ago, a car crash turned you into a child. I said slowly, my voice just loud enough for her to hear. "Did you really think that was an accident?" Chloe's body went rigid. "What are you talking about?" "And my father, Robert Vance, an honest, decent engineer, was framed and died in prison. Also 5 years ago." My voice was laced with 5 years of repressed hatred. "Did you really think that was just a typical case of corporate backstabbing?" I turned to face her, to meet her horrified gaze, and I ripped the truth open, laying it all out for her to see. "That car crash wasn't just for you. It was for my father. He had discovered proof that Croft Enterprises was defrauding the federal government out of billions of dollars. The man who arranged that crash, the man who wanted you both dead, was your beloved Julian Croft. You think Julian loves you? He loves the Astor fortune. He got close to you with the sole intention of one day swallowing your family's company whole. The crash didn't work, so he waited 5 long years for you to wake up, for you to hand him the keys to the kingdom. And you, Chloe," my gaze turned sharp as glass, "the first thing you did when you came back was to pay me off, to get me out of the way so you could clear a path for the man who tried to murder you and who killed my father. Tell me, do I not have a right to my revenge?" Every word was a hammer blow, striking Chloe's heart. Her face turned the color of ash. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Shock, disbelief, horror, regret. The emotions warred on her face, finally dissolving into 2 silent streams of tears that traced paths through the exhaustion on her cheeks. No, impossible. That can't be true, she whispered, shaking her head as if to ward off a nightmare. Julian, you would never do that to me. You're lying. You made this all up to get back at me. Lying. I let out a cold laugh and pulled a small flash drive from my pocket. I tossed it onto the rug in front of her. Here are all the answers you need. The full confession from the hit-and-run driver. It took me years to track him down after Julian sent him overseas. Also, phone recordings of Julian planning my father's downfall with his inner circle. Oh, and one more thing I added. That report from a European agency that blew up your company. Do you know how it got to them? I let the silence hang in the air for a beat. Julian delivered it to them himself. Chloe's head snapped up, her face a canvas of pure disbelief. That's right, I said, twisting the final knife. I was the one who posted that first anonymous article. It was just a bluff designed to make him panic. I knew he was greedy and reckless. I knew if he thought you were vulnerable, he would use an even dirtier trick to finish you off. So I had a third party leak the real weakness of the technology to him. He took the bait. He thought he'd been handed the perfect weapon to bury Astrocorp for good, so he could ride in and play the hero, picking up the pieces. He couldn't wait to pass the evidence along. He personally detonated the bomb that blew himself up. So, Chloe, I finished, my voice soft but brutal. Do you still think he loves you? Chloe finally broke. She stared at the flash drive on the floor as if it were a venomous snake. She wanted to know the truth, but she was terrified of it. It was a truth that would shatter her entire world. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with deep, agonizing sobs. Just then, the front door was kicked open. Julian Croft stormed in, looking like a caged animal. His eyes were wild and bloodshot, his clothes disheveled. The polished executive was gone, replaced by a desperate madman. He saw me, and he saw Chloe, crumpled on the floor. Vance, it was you, he roared, lunging at me. I'll kill you. I didn't move. Just as he reached me, two men in dark suits appeared from the shadows, grabbing him and pinning his arms behind his back. They were my private security, and they'd been waiting. Let me go. Do you know who I am? Julian thrashed wildly. I walked up to him, looking down at the man who had destroyed my life. My eyes were cold. Julian, don't be impatient. The game isn't over yet. I took out my phone and dialed a number. Hello, Detective Miller. This is Ethan Vance. I'd like to report a crime. Yes, a formal statement. Julian Croft, CEO of Croft Enterprises. He's wanted for questioning in connection with multiple counts of corporate fraud, aggravated assault, and a 5-year-old homicide. Evidence? I have everything you need. Eyewitness testimony, recordings, financial records. I'm at the Astor estate right now. Mr. Croft is here with me. I hung up and looked at Julian's face as it morphed from rage to confusion, and finally, to the gray, empty dread of the truly damned. I leaned in close, my voice a whisper only he could hear. My father has been waiting for you for 5 years, Julian. It's time you went to see him. Julian was taken away. As the wail of sirens grew closer, finally screaming to a halt outside the mansion, he stopped fighting. He went limp, a broken man dragged away to face his sins. Chloe watched it all. She didn't cry. She didn't make a sound. She just sat there, her eyes terrifyingly blank. When the police cars were gone, she slowly turned her head and looked at me. She studied my face, my eyes, as if trying to see into my very soul. Then she laughed. A broken, desolate sound. You won, Ethan, she said. This was never about winning or losing against you, I replied quietly. Wasn't it? She pushed herself up from the floor and slowly walked toward me, closing the space between us until we were only a foot apart. I could smell the faint scent of her expensive perfume, now mingled with the sour smell of despair. Then how did you do it? She whispered, her voice trembling. For 5 years. Every day. Looking at me. The daughter of your enemy. The heir to the family you plan to destroy. How could you? She trailed off, but I knew the question. How could you hold so much hate in your heart and still be so gentle, so patient with a broken girl? It was a question I had asked myself 1,000 times. I looked at her pale face, at the raw grief in her eyes, and the memories I had so carefully locked away came flooding back. The girl who had clumsily cooled my fever with her small hands. The girl who had tried to soothe my sorrow with her favorite candy. The girl who had cried for me, her tears falling on my wounds as she cleaned them. The girl in those memories was innocent, a blank slate. She had depended on me, trusted me, given me all the goodness in her small, sheltered world. I had told myself that she wasn't Chloe Astor. She was just a child, a tool to be used in my plan for revenge. But when the tool has a heart, a warmth, a soul, how can the man who wields it remain made of stone? I thought her cold return, her cruelty, had severed that connection for good, allowing me to become the pure instrument of vengeance I needed to be. But now, seeing her like this, shattered and fragile, that old, familiar ache returned to my chest. Because I finally said, my own voice hoarse, the person you were then and the person you are now, they're two different people. The girl she was innocent. She was a victim in this tragedy, just like me. So I could hate Julian. I could hate the Astor name and everything it represented, but I could never hate the girl who called me. Chloe flinched as if I had struck her. My words, it seemed, had hurt her more than all the terrible truths I'd revealed before. The last bit of color drained from her face. Her lips trembled, but she couldn't speak. She staggered back, as if all her strength had abandoned her. Finally, she found her voice. It was as faint as smoke. So, in your eyes, the broken Chloe was better than the real me. Is that it? I didn't answer. I didn't know how. It was an impossible question. My silence was her answer. A wave of regret, so powerful it buckled her knees, washed over her. She covered her face, and a choked, broken sob escaped her lips, a sound of pure, undiluted pain. She finally understood. She hadn't just lost her company or her fantasy of love. She had pushed away the only person in the world who had ever truly protected her, who had ever been truly good to her. At the moment of her greatest triumph, when she thought she had regained control of her life, she had made the single most devastating mistake a person could make. And there was no going back. I watched her, my own heart in turmoil. I wanted to leave, to put this all behind me. But my feet were rooted to the spot. Just then, my phone rang. It was Arthur, the Astor's old butler. Mr. Vance? Arthur's voice was thick with tears. It's Mr. Astor. He's not going to make it. He's asking for you. Please come to the hospital. He wants to see you one last time. When I arrived at the hospital, old man Astor was barely breathing. The room was crowded with his family, but none of them looked truly sad. Their faces showed a mixture of grim acceptance and greedy anticipation. The empire had fallen. The king was dying. Now it was time to fight over the scraps. When they saw me walk in, their expressions soured with resentment, contempt, and a healthy dose of fear. The old man struggled to open his eyes. His gaze scanned the room, finally landing on me. He beckoned me over. I walked to his bedside and leaned down. Ethan, he rasped, his hand gripping mine. His fingers were frail and cold. You did it. You were. Even better than I could have imagined. I did what I promised, I said evenly. Cough, cough. A violent coughing fit seized him, and a trickle of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. I know. You're a good man. I was right about you. His breathing grew shallow. But I failed you. And I failed. Chloe, I know what you mean, I said softly. I knew he wasn't just talking about the car crash. He was talking about the bigger secret, the one that even Chloe didn't know. The old man's cloudy eyes widened in surprise, then softened into a knowing, bitter smile. You know. Yes. How had I known so much about Astor Corp's inner workings? How had I pinpointed their weaknesses with such deadly accuracy? Was I just a genius who had figured it all out while playing the part of the fool's husband? Not entirely. I had an accomplice. My accomplice was Chloe herself. The broken, childlike Chloe. Her brain injury hadn't been a complete shutdown. Her conscious mind was a locked room, yes. But her subconscious was wide awake. She couldn't follow complex logic, but her instincts, her perception of emotion and danger were incredibly sharp. That's why she had clung to me. And at the same time, her mind was like a sponge, passively absorbing everything around her. Everything she saw, everything she overheard, was stored deep in her subconscious. And over our 5 years together, I had discovered the key. I found that when I read her favorite book, The Little Prince, in a specific, gentle cadence, she would enter a relaxed, almost hypnotic state. In that state, I could ask her simple questions, and like someone talking in her sleep, she would repeat fragments of conversations she had overheard during the day. Grandpa argued with Uncle Michael. Said, the numbers were wrong. That boy, Julian, I don't like his eyes. Like a wolf. Uncle Richard said, Grandpa is playing favorites. Giving the company. To an outsider, piece by piece, these fragments formed a complete, secret map of the Astor dynasty's internal rot. I knew it was a despicable thing to do. I was exploiting the trust of a mentally incapacitated person, mining her subconscious for secrets. But for my revenge, I saw no other way. And old man Astor, shrewd to the very end, had figured it out. After I used Chloe's dreams to help him thwart a few internal rebellions, he knew what I was doing. But he never said a word. He let it happen. Because, like me, he needed to fight Julian to fight the wolves inside his own family. The old man, his granddaughter, and the outsider. A strange, silent alliance. We were both using her. He, to save his legacy. Me, to get my revenge. This was the reality of the world we lived in. Ugly, pragmatic, and heartbreaking. Ethan, the old man, seemed to rally, a final burst of energy lighting his eyes. Astor Corp. I couldn't save it. But Chloe, I'm entrusting her. To you. With his last ounce of strength, he pulled a thick envelope from under his pillow and pressed it into my hand. This is the last thing I could do for her. Please. His voice faded, and his hand fell limp. The heart monitor flatlined. The room erupted in a chorus of performative grief. I didn't cry. I just stood there, clutching the warm documents in my hand, before turning and walking out of that theater of hypocrisy. I didn't see the slender figure slumped against the wall in the hallway, just outside the door. It was Chloe. She must have arrived at some point during my conversation. She had heard everything. There were no tears on her face, just a blank, numb emptiness that was worse than tears, worse than death. She wasn't two people after all. The broken girl and the brilliant woman were one and the same. One lived on the surface, the other locked deep inside. And both of them had been used as tools by the two most important men in her life. By the grandfather she revered to protect his empire, and by the husband she had trusted to enact his revenge. In that moment, she finally understood the meaning of true despair. After Mr. Astor's funeral, the family descended into chaos. The remnants of Astor Corp were quickly devoured by creditors and competitors. The Astor children and grandchildren fought viciously over the last dregs of the fortune, their squabbles becoming front-page tabloid fodder. And Chloe vanished. Some said she had a complete breakdown and was in a private psychiatric hospital. Others said her family had cast her out and she'd left the country with what little she had left. No one knew for sure. I didn't try to find her. Julian's case was airtight. With the mountain of evidence against him, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Croft Enterprises was liquidated. My revenge was complete. But I felt no joy. My heart felt hollowed out, empty. I used the money I'd made to start my own investment firm. With David's help, it became successful almost overnight. I became the city's newest star, the enigmatic Mr. Vance. I lived in a penthouse in the newest, tallest skyscraper, drove a fleet of expensive cars, and had a membership at every exclusive club. I had everything I had ever thought I wanted. But at night, sitting alone in my vast, silent apartment, my mind would drift back to those 5 years. To the girl who would tug on my sleeve and call me, to the way she would cry as she cleaned my cuts, her small hands so gentle, to the taste of a strawberry lollipop, and the simple belief that candy could make the sadness go away. Those memories were etched into my soul. I had told myself it was all an act, but somewhere along the way, my heart had forgotten it was acting. I finally opened the envelope old man Astor had given me. Inside was a trust agreement and a stock transfer certificate. Knowing his company was doomed, the old man had secretly moved his most valuable private assets into an offshore trust. The sole beneficiary was Chloe. At the same time, he had transferred his personal shares in a portfolio of incredibly promising startups directly to me. The value of these documents was staggering. It was enough to ensure that both Chloe and I could live like royalty for the rest of our lives. At the back of the envelope was a letter addressed to me. It read, Ethan, I know you hate Julian and you hate the injustice of the world, but I hope that once your revenge is complete, you can let go of the hate and learn to live again. Chloe is a good soul who has suffered more than anyone should. I was a terrible grandfather to her. Now, I'm giving her to you. I know that you're the only one who ever truly cared for her. The key to her trust requires two signatures, hers and yours as the trustee. It's the last bit of meddling this old fool can do, tying you two together. Forgive my selfishness. I clutched the letter, my eyes burning. The old fox, calculating to the very end. But this time, his calculation wasn't about power or money. It was about a clumsy, desperate kind of love. Love for his granddaughter and a hope for me. I took the documents, got in my car, and on an impulse I didn't understand, drove to the Greenwich mansion I had once called home. The property had been seized by the bank. A thick chain and a legal notice were wrapped around the imposing iron gates. All the life was gone from it. I parked across the street and just sat there for a long time. I didn't know why I'd come. Maybe just to look at the place that held 5 years of my life, of love and hate intertwined. As I was about to leave, I saw a figure walking toward the gates. It was Chloe. She was wearing a faded trench coat and carrying a simple canvas tote bag. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was thinner, still pale, but her eyes were no longer empty. They held a quiet, settled sadness. She seemed as surprised to see me as I was to see her. We looked at each other through my windshield. For a moment, time stood still. I got out of the car and walked toward her until we were standing on opposite sides of the cold iron gate. Are you okay? I heard myself ask, my voice rough. She looked at me, then reached in her tote bag and pulled something out. She held it out to me through the bars. It was a small, hand-sewn stuffed tiger. The stitches were crooked, the shape a little lumpy. But I recognized it instantly. She had made it for me 3 years ago, when she was still broken. It was a secret birthday present she'd spent weeks working on. She had told me that tigers were strong and could protect me. When I received it, my heart had ached with a strange mix of sorrow and warmth. I just smiled and told her it was perfect. In my haste to leave, I had left it behind in a nightstand drawer. I thought it would have been thrown out with the rest of the trash. I found this. After you left, she said, her voice soft but clear, and I found other things. The sketches I drew of you. A little blanket I made for the tiger out of one of your old shirts. And a diary I couldn't understand. Her eyes met mine. There was only one sentence in it, written over and over again on every page. I love you. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I could barely breathe. Ethan, she looked at me, and finally, the tears she'd been holding back began to fall. I'm sorry. 3 words, spoken with the weight of a lifetime of regret. For her arrogance, her blindness. For mistaking 5 years of devotion for a business transaction. Because she had finally remembered. She had unlocked that deep, pure, simple love she'd had for me all along. I couldn't stop myself. I wrenched open the heavy gate, stepped through, and pulled her in my arms. Her thin body trembled against mine. The sob she had held back for so long finally broke free. I held her just as I had held that lost little girl 1,000 times before, my hand stroking her back, whispering that it was okay. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, dappling us in light and shadow. In that moment, all the hate, all the coldness, all the emptiness in my heart melted away in the warmth of her embrace. I finally understood. My revenge was never about destruction. It was about clearing a path, about burning down the forest of lies so that one day I could stand in the sunlight, free and clear, and hold the person I loved. I lowered my head, my lips close to her ear, and whispered the words only we could understand. Welcome home, Chloe. Not to this cold, empty mansion, but home to me, my broken girl, my brilliant love. This time, it was my turn to protect her for the rest of my life. End.